People who have tried to meet someone from the Internet IRL. What happened? Met my wife on an online forum when I was 16 and she was 15. Dates for 3 years, broke up for a while, got back together and have been married for almost 7 years now. Her mom still thinks we met at a summer camp I never went to. Met a girl on a Harry Potter forum when I was 15 years old. I'm from Canada and she is from France. When I turned 17, flew to France to spend 3 weeks at her place and she then flew back to Canada with me for 3 weeks. 10 years later and we are still really good friend. Met again in Ireland 2 years ago. First person I met from the internet. We started a private game server together. Fun times, fell out of touch. Second person I met from the internet hooked me up with a job in IT. Got me started in the industry and has been my career mentor ever since. He played on our private server. I met one of my best friends in an AOL chat room 18 years ago. I chatted with her nightly for about a year, lost contact for 2, then bumped into her IRL and have been friends ever since. We were also recently roommates for a year and a half. She is basically a sister to me. We had been planning to meet after known each other for years online. Just a couple of crazy old guys who loved cars, beer, and weird crap. I had a business trip that was gonna take me out near to where he lived. He lived in northern NH, and I had a trip to Montreal, but my business trip got delayed, and delayed again. And between those cancellations, his cancer, which he had defeated once, came back with a freaking vengeance. When I contacted him about my updated schedule to come out in, what was then, 6 weeks from the call, he said his doc said he had weeks to live. I told him I didn't care what it meant. I was gonna stick with the plan. So I reserved a rental car on the hope he'd still be kicking. I stayed in touch regularly. He moved to a hospice and I let him know that I had cared for my dying grandmother through months of hospice, 24/6, as she died of cancer. So I'd been there and seen it. I was not scared of hospice and would be honored to see him regardless of where he was. When the weekend came, my flight got delayed. There was a forecast of frozen mix between Montreal and the border, but I drove it anyway. I landed in Montreal, paid out of pocket for my rental car, dropped my bags at the hotel downtown, and drove to NH. I got to the hospice around 9 PM and talked to him and his wife for hours. I brought his some Timbits at his request. It was the only thing he asked for. Eventually, around 2:30 AM I realized that I needed to head back, because I had to be at work, teaching a class, at 9 AM, back in Canada. So I slowly say my goodbyes, take a picture with them, and drive back. I called my son to keep me awake, and when I got to the border back to Canada I told the guards that I had some carrots in my bag that had come from the US via plane, to Canada, to NH, and now back to Canada, and that was the only thing I had to declare. My son stayed with me on the phone until I got back to my hotel, where I took a power nap, and then taught my class that day. God Duck, my friend's online nickname, passed on last Thanksgiving, which was just a couple of weeks after I visited, but he held on and fought and faced it through it all. He never flinched or looked away. He was thankful for the extra time he had with his wife and getting to see friends. He and his wife were among the greatest people I have ever met. Speaking of, I got a Christmas card from her a couple of days ago. I'm in the process of putting together a care package for her. She's doing as well as could be, I guess. This is just to say, imaginary internet friends are sometimes the best friends you'll ever make. And I regret nothing. RIP God Duck. Thank you for sharing your story. I posted in a thread looking for vocalists in my area to sing on some songs I've been working on. Someone responded to look up someone via Instagram. I looked her up and she's good, really good. Turns out she's been recording at a studio just down the street from my house. I let a little while pass without messaging her because I wasn't quite ready to send anything out yet. Cut to my band show last weekend at this dive bar on the other side of town. Get off the stage and she's in the crowd actually approached us and complimented us. Took me a minute before I made the connection. Sent her the songs yesterday and she liked them. Or cool, it's a small world. I kinda have two examples here. Met a guy online through a pen pal website. I love writing letters. I live in Australia and he lived in California. We decided to try a long distance relationship, and after 6 months he came to stay with me for 3 weeks. He never left and we've been together nearly 9 years, married for 2. During the wedding planning process I was an avid gamer. I met someone to play games with that was going to teach me to play better since I wasn't very good. Got talking and found out that the guy and his wife were wedding photographers and we had just had ours cancelled because he double booked himself. They flew down and did our wedding photography for us. All in all, had pretty good experiences I would say. Does Craigslist count? Because I got a lot of roommates off Craigslist over the years. Became very good friends with a few of them. One of them had this ex-boyfriend she wouldn't stop complaining about, all day every day. Her stories about him were so outlandish and she was so embittered. It made me insanely curious about what his side of the story was. Given that I lived with her and knew that she could be a handful, I wound up meeting him randomly a few years later, not online, and paid extra close attention because I knew who he was from all of her endless complaining. I was like, huh, he's really cute, and he seems smart, and funny, and not at all like a human garbage monster. And then we fell in love and had a baby, blah blah blah. I sometimes wonder if it would have happened if I'd never met this random bitter ex-girlfriend after posting a roommate ad on Craigslist. I probably wouldn't have paid nearly as much attention to him if I hadn't been hearing terrible stories about him for literally years. For what it's worth, we are still together and I really must attribute her stories to the fact that everyone is a less than ideal partner when they're like 17 years old. One woman's human trash monster is another woman's human treasure monster. I was friends with a girl who I met as just a random friend request during the MySpace days. She lived about 6 hours away, and after months of always chatting whether it be online or over the phone, I visited her. I like to think we had a good time. I mean we just hung out, watched movies, whatever. I don't know what happened, but suddenly afterwards she didn't seem all that interested in being close friends afterwards, and would give short responses, never initiating conversations like she used to. It sucked. I feel like she was one of the few people who got me, but really I guess I just wasn't anyone meaningful to her. Possibility. Maybe you saw her as a friend and she wanted to see if there was more, or she built you up in her head to be someone who couldn't meet her expectations. You both met. It wasn't the same. She moved on. I met a guy online, not romantic sort of met, and he was passing through my college town's area one day. We met, played Smash Bros in the dorm commons, and then he left. I have no idea what happened to him. I joined a couple small gaming forums in 2002. I befriended lots of people on each, and found myself wanting to meet everyone. Some people thought the idea creepy, but it was purely out of friendship on my side. So in 2008 I saved up about $1,500 and went on a 3-week, 8,000-mile road trip to meet anyone who was interested in having me visit them. I met over 20 people on that trip. Every visit was awesome in its own way. It's a lot cheaper than you might think it is if you're willing to sleep in your car or if people you visit let you stay the night. One of the women I met on that trip married me 6 years later. Been together ever since. I've also had one friend from that group live with me for a couple years, before the road trip actually, and I've met several others under other circumstances. Meet people from the internet. It's great. Trust me, I can literally say it changed my life, and for the better. It is just hard sometimes to find the right people. Guy that had exchanged messages with from a Cupid found me on Facebook. I was a bit weirded out but accepted his friend request and noticed his last name didn't match with all his other family members. Not a common last name. I googled his name and nothing came up. Then I googled his first name with the last name that most of his family members had and boom. The registered diddler had been out for less than a year after serving 12 years for debauchery 2, sodomy 2, and a couple other charges. I told him what I found, said thanks but no thanks. I deleted a Cupid and never went on a dating site again. Should have told his parole officer what you found as he was likely violating his parole by using dating sites and Facebook. We long distance dated several years, then got married for 5 or 6 years, then divorced. Now I'm remarried and we each have our own kids. My husband likes my ex-husband and we all play D&D together often. My ex is a trusted friend and like family to me. I have met two of my best friends, women, on the internet as well. I always like to hear about ex-couples that actually stay friends. There are too many stories of crash and burn relationships out there, which is why I like that my roommate's ex-boyfriend still regularly visits and we all can hang out. Even her current boyfriend likes him. To be fair though, the ex-boyfriend, is the nicest dude and really hard to dislike. We met on Reddit about 2.5 years ago. After 4 months, I flew across the country to see him. We are currently watching Netflix together while we work on a puzzle. I met one of my best friends over Instagram when I was 12ish. We both had pretty popular photography type pages, and we started talking through DM. Many FaceTime calls and conversations later, we met in person with our moms when we were 14. The next year I flew out to California to stay with their family and go to Disneyland with them. Then the next year I flew out to their home and spent over 2 weeks with them. Oh cool, those sound like some cool moms. I met him. He came to my house, then basically refused to leave. He is currently using my foot as a pillow curled on the floor. He's lucky I like him. Is he a dog? Met a Ukrainian girl on a language app back in 2017. Skyped with her every day for a year. Bought a ticket to Kiev, capital of Ukraine. It didn't work out. Such is life sometimes. You did it wrong. She was supposed to mail herself to you. My daughter met a friend online. They both had popular fan fiction things. They became friends helping each other write various stories. He comes out at least twice a year and stays a week or so. He lives in PA and we live in CA. I have quite a few friends IRL that I met online now, and I've been in a 5-year relationship with my partner after meeting online. I also got out of my abusive household via an online friend. So far so good. I took a big risk trusting the friend who helped me move out all those years ago, but I was at such a low point that the risk seemed worth it. I wouldn't recommend others make the same choice. Whoa, props to the friend who helped you move out. I met a girl from Tumblr at a meetup I organized. This was back in 2010 when Tumblr wasn't quite so crazy. We got married a couple years later and have a kid together, with one more on the way. Explaining how we met now is awkward, since Tumblr became the cesspool that it is today. Way back when I met a funny guy almost my age in a chat room hosted over a specific location in another state, circa 2002. I used to moderate this chat but always found more joy in life running off trolls with humor and patience than banning them, and we would start in on someone or some topic and keep a room in stitches until 3-5 am when we got on a roll. Time would discover in the days of ASL inquiries that we lived about 30 miles from each other. Constantly said we need to meet up. Never did. But we had a great time laughing and cutting up this crazy chat, then eventually I left it completely. I had his email, so then one day we reconnected on Facebook. In 2011 I moved a little further away, now about 55 miles from him. But then in 2012 he moved part-time about 25 miles away from my new homestead to a new hometown, which is my now city center for most things you can't find in my pasture. Worst part of this shallow bitrate friendship was I worked on the road and frequented his hometown in both towns at least 2x a week over all the years we said we would meet up. When we first virtually met we both had 2 kids, hardworking, breadwinners for our families. Finally, 2012, a similar themed paid opportunity arose aligned to the original chat room topic we met under that I was pulled into for a secondary moonlight position after consulting, and I offered the guy to be a part of my team. Sight unseen, as we had not yet met in person yet. However, I knew over years of funny banter and his interest of the like he was literally born for this, and it would be a blessing to him at the time and my team. He accepted and we started working together, becoming better friends over the next 5 years. About 3 weeks ago 4 of my now 5 kids finally met 4 of his now 5 kids. Craziest part, we were born 2,000 miles apart, but him and I share the same first and middle names. We've even tagged each accidentally in photos online just on the name alone. One of his youngest daughters, twin, has the same name as my youngest daughter, though we spell them differently and it wasn't even intentional. One day we might come full circle and recognize each other's Reddit story to complete the circle of online friendship. Today might be that day. He'll know it based on this alone. Oh, so cool. I hope so. I was best friends soulmates with a girl I met on the internet when I was 10. We were so close we wrote long letters to each other every day, dreamed of the day we would be united in real life, and we even believed we were telepathic and could send one another mental messages long distance. She was the closest friend I ever had for probably at least 5 years. We stopped talking for a few years but stayed distant friends. One day out of the blue she says she's headed my way and wants to meet up. She ended up crashing on my couch for about a week. I was super nervous to meet her. I thought she changed a lot and we wouldn't relate anymore, especially since we hadn't been talking as often. When I met her in person it was like we'd never been apart and we'd known each other in person the whole time. We'd never webcammed and barely even exchanged photos, but she was so familiar to me. Still the best friend I've ever had, and I am grateful to have rekindled our relationship in that way. Yeah, but did you frick her? Basically all my friends are from online gaming, all over the world, and we have met, with few exceptions. One in particular stands out, was being flamed at in an MMO battleground. This one other player supported me and backed me up against the crowd, twice in a row. It made me curious, so I PM'd them after the second game and they were actually on the same server as me. First I thought they were being a bit overly weird, then I thought they were also gay, until I figured out it was a girl I was talking to. That explained their way of writing and what they were writing, which threw me off since I had been assuming I'm talking to a male. 5 months later we met in her country. Now we've been a couple for over 3 years, engaged for 1 and travel the planet together. I'm not gay or bi. Met one of my friends to this day. IDK if gaming counts, but we met playing a game. Played for a couple years, some of my close friends and his played together. He drove 9 hours with a friend to my house. Had a heck of a time. We see each other once a year at least and play still. Wow, that's sweet. A guy who lived 2 states away friend requested me on the MySpace. We never really chatted or connected. Fast forward 12 or so years and I'm in the state this guy lives in at a wine bar enjoying an acoustic set. The musician looks super familiar, it's the guy from MySpace. It's a small bar and so he casually says between songs, "You look very familiar. Have we met?" And before thinking, I blurt out sort of. It was a long time ago, but it's not the type of story you'd want me to tell in front of everyone at the bar. Immediately he turned. I realized immediately after I said it what my comment must have sounded like. We chatted later privately about being MySpace friends back in the day. Everyone in that bar definitely got the impression we hooked up, as there were many snickers in my direction throughout the evening. At the time, announcing we met on MySpace across the bar seemed embarrassing. Well, we've been dating for almost 4 years, so it's been going pretty well. One day we'll get married, but we have next to no money because she's a broke college student and I'm a broke manager supporting her, so we are waiting on it. We're raising 2 cats together too. Our fur children are amazing and I'm so proud of how much sleep they accomplish. LOL. Like that show, 2 Broke Girls. You could just call yourselves 2 broke but happy in love people with 2 cats. I fell for a girl once. We met in a chat room and talked just about every day for 2 years. Long distance with her in the US and me in Australia. One day she basically just disappeared without word, and feeling impulsive I thought I'd fly over to visit her. Would be just like a movie, making a grand romantic gesture and everything working out perfect. So I flew all the way to a small town called Altua, TN. Booked the closest hotel to her house, which was an almost 10-mile walk to her house. So I walked all the way and knocked on the door. Hear the footsteps rushing to the door, my heart racing. Open the door and it's a 13-year-old African American boy. Knocked on every door in that street hoping I'd just made a mistake, but no dice. One of the lowest points of my life, walking back to the hotel and spending the rest of the week alone on the opposite side of the world. People who can ghost like that really blow my mind. I don't know how they can do it. I'm so sorry you went through that. We stared at each other and ate ice cream. The forced conversation was so uncomfortable that silence couldn't even be shared properly. I had my friend call me and act like my dad to leave early. She was awesome in the DMs but lacked social skills entirely in person. Yeah, that's why I've been shying away from meeting online friends. I need those few seconds afforded by text chat to formulate my replies and thoughts. Met her on Twitch 3 years ago and quickly became best friends. Finally flew over to see her a few months ago, and about a week into it she asked me to make it official and be her girlfriend. We're now trying to save money for me to move to her state and get a place together. Feels good, man. They asked me a lot of questions. I mean a lot. We met several more times, then they hired me because that's how job interviews work. Met a Singaporean girl more than 10 years ago online. I used to make fairly popular flash animations and she was a fan. We got together since both of us were somewhat loners. Chatted and cammed almost every day for a couple of years. Later she found someone. Then I found someone. Then I broke up a few years ago and the Singaporean girl starts chatting with me again. Turns out she also broke up around the same time, so we started the long distance relationship thing all over again, and since we were now adults and I had my own place, we seriously started to entertain the idea of her visiting me. She does, pays for the ticket herself and plans on living in my apartment for 1 month. I'm stressed out and imagine all the things that can go wrong. Things went great. Better than I could have ever hoped. Nothing but YouTube, loving and video games together every day. If there ever was a person I'd love to spend the rest of my life with, it's her. Best part is, the feeling is mutual. Since then she has visited me a second time, but at this moment there are no plans for her to stay here permanently. Kinda hurts that I get to see her only for like once a year, but at least I have something to look forward to. Sorry, boring story. No twist. It is what it is. Wait, have we come back around where it's weird again? I met my first real girlfriend on Hot or Not like 15 years ago. I met my second girlfriend on World of Warcraft. I met my third on Match, fourth on Hegemony and fifth on Tinder. I'm now married to the Tinder girl and we have a kid. There's also an unknown number of women I met on all said sites prior to this marriage. I feel like, other than my family and the handful of friends I have from school, every single person I know is somehow from the internet. Row. Went on vacation with 100 people from online. Married one of them. Been to most of their houses. We've known each other for almost 30 years. I'm friends with their kids and watching them have kids. Late 90s. Went to meet a gal I met on Yahoo. It was a blind date. On Valentine's Day. She was very pretty but there was no chemistry. I can't remember her name to be honest. When I was 14 I met a girl online through One Direction. I'm in St. Louis and she's in Sacramento. I flew down there 3 years ago and spent a week with her. We're both 22 now and she's my best friend still. 2 years ago I made a friend from London on FB through a different band and she flew to the United States and spent a week here. The following year I flew there. She's coming back in a few months. She's one of the greatest people in my life. I guess my husband too. I didn't even think to count him. We matched on Tinder the 1st of October, 2016. Went on our first date the 5th of October, 2016. And we got married the 5th of October, 2017. So I guess that worked out well. I'm convinced everyone on the internet is tall as frick. I'm not particularly short or anything, 5 feet 10, but every single person I've met from the internet is huge, like 6 feet 2 inches or higher. I've met probably 10 people from various communities over years of being part of different stuff, and I swear, every time, they're at least a head taller than me. Y'all are some tall M. Stop it. I was in a long distance relationship for a year and he flew down and met me. We went to a convention, had fricked and continued dating and meeting for about 4 years till we broke up. I also had a good online friend meet up with me and we hung out and had a great time. And finally I met up with a lot of friends from Discord and it was absolutely amazing. Ended up going to another convention and had a blast there too. I met a girl in a Habbo hotel room way over 10 years ago and realized she lived in the same town as me. We ended up becoming inseparable and best friends for several years. We eventually drifted but she's still my friend to this day. This pertains to 2 different friends. We played World of Warcraft for something like 7 years. We had always joked and mentioned about actually hanging out, but we were both middle schoolers when we started playing WoW. Fast forward to 2016, both of us are grown up with jobs and still in constant contact through video games and social media. We finally went forward with a plan for me to fly from Minnesota, where I live, out to New York where he lived. Spent a week out there and had some of the most fun of my life. I returned in 2017 for a 2-week stay, planning on going back again this spring. He's even tried to get me to move out there with him. The second friend was the guy that introduced me to my first friend. I never chalked him up as the type that would open his door to strangers from the internet. He was our guild leader in WoW and was quite a bit older than all of us, like 10 years, so for most of the time knowing him it wasn't really something I considered until 2018, where I'm in my mid-20s and hanging out with people in their 30s isn't weird at all. I rented a car and drove down and met up with him after nearly 10 years of gaming together and spent an enjoyable week hanging out and playing video games together. I strongly suggest, if you trust your internet gaming friends enough, to go visit them. It's something I haven't for a second regretted and has become a yearly tradition for me. I messaged a friend of a friend on MySpace around 2008. We became good online friends as she was in Europe backpacking at the time and staying with her family in England in the interim. She was going to be coming back to the States, had grown up there, to find a job, and she asked if she could crash at my place. Of course I said yes. Upon meeting in person the first time, all of our feelings held via online chats and messages materialized. The attraction was instant, but the timing was all wrong as she had just gotten out of a long-term relationship. We were good friends still but had a falling out. My fault. Nothing weird, just being a dumb young guy who thought he was hot crap and lost touch for a little while. 2010. Sometime in 2011 I get a text saying she's coming through town with her friend, girl, after having completed a hitchhiking race and needs a place to crash. We had texted every now and again to check in and to let the other know we missed each other. So of course I said yes. Duh. We met up, ate Mexican food, had some drinks and had a great time reconnecting in real life. The next day the girls, in the spirit of the aforementioned hitchhiking race despite it being over, wanted to hitch from my place, Nashville, to a little town in TX. They asked to be dropped off along the highway I-40 West and I offered to take them 50 miles as a small head start. Of course it starts raining. Around the 50-mile mark I offer to take them 100 miles. It's 750 miles door to door for them, as I'm feeling bad about picturing them with their thumbs out on the highway in crappy weather. These girls can handle themselves, but even still. And the three of us and their gear are crammed into my little GMC Sonoma, so this is definitely not a long road trip kind of vehicle. 15 hours later we arrive at their destination in TX. 3 days later I'll leave TX. She and I both having enjoyed the time immensely, but with our minds a tad confused as to where things go from here. We stay in touch as much as we can, but our lives are indeed busy. In spring 2012, after much discussion, I leave everything and move to TX to pursue job opportunities and take her on a date. In winter 2014 we move in together. In late fall 2015 we get engaged. In late summer 2016 we are married. We are now living and working in England and continuing to love life with each other. So, yeah, internet friends for the win. I broke down and tried out Tinder and ended up securing a date. The girl was 45 minutes away and wanted to see Justice League on release weekend since she was into comics like I am. And she wanted to meet at a local comic shop before we went to the theater. I met her there and she ended up dressing in pajamas and also brought her sister. Afterwards, they immediately said they were going to Taco Bell and for me to follow them, to which they took a bunch of weird turns and speeds that I couldn't follow and I lost them. I went back to the comic book store and tried to text her, but she ended up buying a burner phone to talk to me and never responded to anything for 4 months. I ended up watching the movie at a $4 movie theater. At least the popcorn was good. Man, that sucks. At least the popcorn was good and the film was half decent. Ran a YT channel back in the glory days of YouTube with a Canadian I met on a Minecraft server. Year later he flew to England to go to Eurogamer as we had press passes. Picked him up from the airport. It was ace. Until he had photoshopped a picture of me to make it look like I was noshing on a big dong and had printed it 30 times and it was on top of his luggage when he cleared customs. He's hilarious but embarrassing as heck. They are never exactly like what you picture in your head, but in almost all cases they are pretty much the same person I was talking to online. Started talking to a random stranger through Omegle from the opposite side of the country. He saved me from suicide, my abusive home life and my crappy hometown. Turned out to be the love of my life. Met for the first time in person after around 6 months. Ran away from home to be with him. Now I live in a completely different state, have an amazing job, and a lovely apartment. We spend every day together and have been together for 2 years now. This sounds like a question from the late 90s. I've met dozens of people this way, many dozens. Most people were fine, a few a bit weird. I find some people still have a problem with it. I also initially wanted to make the question specifically people who've met others from Reddit because I hear less about it, but mods took it down. I have met 2 people from Reddit IRL, not counting the mod admin meetup in 2017 I went to. The first messaged me and we got to chatting and she said she was coming to Chicago for the Blues Festival. I offered her a place to stay if she needed one and she agreed. It was innocent at first, but we ended up hooking up for that week and then she went back to Canada. This was like 5 years ago and she and I are still good friends and talk all the time. The second messaged me too, saying she really connected with a comment I made about first seeing the ocean because she had just gone through a similar experience. She was going to come down to Chicago to visit a friend of hers and asked for suggestions of things to do. I gave her a bunch and then we kept talking and finding out we had more and more in common. We eventually started talking over the phone and text messages, and when she came down we went to Cumas for burgers and beer. We kept talking and I was really starting to like her. She said she wanted to come down to Chicago again and if she could stay with me. I told her of course, and a few weeks later she was here for Saturday and Sunday. Really it was mostly Sunday because she got in late on Saturday and fell asleep on my couch. The next day we went to the zoo and had a really amazing day. After that we came back to my place and decided to go to the brewery nearby which made a beer that had her name in it. We went there and then ended up bar hopping through until we ended up near the dive bar by my apartment. We drank and played pool there and eventually grabbed some to-go beers and headed back. I asked if she wanted to see the place by the river I liked to go and drink and think. We sat and eventually started making out and decided to head back to my apartment. We hooked up and then the next day went to the south side to get breakfast at a place she really liked near her friend's apartment before she had to drive back. We kept talking after that and I was planning on coming up to visit her in Detroit. But then one day she just ghosted me out of nowhere. I don't know why she did, but I was really bummed because I liked this girl a lot. I've had 1 or 2 situations like that. Just gotta keep that memory. Some relationships are only meant for one night. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.